Hello guys, welcome to another YouTube video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the new Warlock exotic, the Speaker's Sight helmet. But before we do, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel, as both help out me tremendously as I make content for you guys. Thank you. Let's get on with the video. This helmet has the armor perk Lost Voice, healing grenade, spawn a restorative turret, healing allies occasionally spawns, and orb of power. Is pretty cool for the support type playstyle, and today I'm going to show y'all how to make a kind of a cool build with it. I'm going to go over the aspects and fragments that you should use for it. There are two mandatory things that you should use, and then some optional things. So there's going to be a couple different play styles that you can go about with this. There's going to be a way for solo play that I will show you, and then there's going to be a way for team-based play that I will show you. And we'll just go over the team-based things right now. The main two mandatory things that you really need are going to be the healing grenade and then a touch of flame, because touch of flame will increase the performance of the healing grenade, thus the healing turret. So base healing grenade will just give you restoration times 1 and cure times 1. Whenever you use touch of flame with it, it upgrades cure and restoration to times 2. Those are the two core things regardless of how you run this build. And now we'll just go along with the team-based play. So for me personally, super of choice right now is the new Song of Flame super. Casting it unleashes your inner fire, making your equipped weapons radiant and enhances your abilities. Specifically, while Song of Flame is active, you and nearby allies regenerate abilities more quickly, are more resistant to incoming damage, and your solar and kinetic weapons scorch targets. So this is going to be really good for something you could potentially use during a DPS phase. I'm not entirely certain how this plays into in-game PvE meta just yet. I don't know if it's necessarily a replacement for Well of Radiance, because Well of Radiance gives a ton of healing, but this does give you Radiant, and it enhances your allies' regeneration of abilities, or their ability cooldown, so that's cool. That's going to be your super of choice there. You can use whichever class ability you want. I prefer one that heals you, so I'm a bigger fan of Healing Rift myself. You can also use Phoenix Dive. If you're a mad lad, you could use Empowering Rift, but that's not going to be for me. I personally use Burst Glide. Jump of choice is up to you. Incinerator Snap. I personally like Incinerator Snap because it is easier to activate an ignition with. I think you only need to have like 3, maybe 4 of the wisps to connect to the single target to create an ignition. So I'm going with Incinerator Snap for anti-unstoppable champion capabilities. Like we mentioned earlier, the necessities. Healing Grenade. Two aspects of choice, like we talked about. We're already going with Touch of Flame. Healing, Solar, Firebolt, and Fusion Grenades have enhanced functionality. Like I said earlier, improves the strength of cure and restoration effects on Healing Grenade. And then we're going to go with the new Hellion Solar aspect, activating your class ability to summon a solar mortar that lobs flaming projectiles at distant targets. Targets damaged by the mortars are scorched. This is going to be important for the build here momentarily to feed back into the play with the fragments. So, speaking of, we're going to go with the fragments now. My fragments of choice are going to be Ember of Singeing. Your class ability recharges faster when you scorch targets, so we're going to use the scorch that Hellion gives. Whenever we use our class ability, we activate the Hellion, which is the solar buddy, for lack of a better way to call it. Kind of like how Arc has an Arc buddy and Void has a Void buddy. Solar will have their new Solar buddy. You can use your class ability to scorch targets. You can use the Hellion from the class ability activation to scorch targets, which in return, whenever you scorch targets with Hellion, it will decrease your cooldown on your class ability, so that way these are feeding back into each other. Ember of Singeing feeding back into Hellion. Hellion getting cooldown to activate Ember of Singeing. Ember of Benevolence, we're going to be using this for team-based play. Applying Restoration, Cure, or Radiant to allies grants increased grenade and melee and class ability regen for a short duration. So this is going to be the bread and butter of the team-based play part, where you're going to throw your grenade healing turret. You're going to throw it preferably closer to your teammates than to yourself whenever you're in activities. So that way the healing grenade turret will want to seek to them, and if you need to get some sort of healing, you can run closer to it, so that way it will find you and tag you for some healing. We're going to be using Ember of Torches. Powered melee attacks against combatants make you and nearby allies radiant. We're going to be using this for a supplementation for anti-barrier. So whenever you use a powered melee attack against a target, you can give yourself radiant, which is a counter to anti-barrier champs. So we're going to be using Ember of Torches here. And then in the final slot, we're going to be using Ember of Solace. Radiant restoration effects to you have an increased duration. So whatever restoration or radiant that we get, restoration that we get from the healing turret, radiant that we get from Ember of Torches, we're going to be extending the duration of it thanks to Ember of Solace. Now, let's go on to the armor mods. For team-based play, I'm going with Harmonic Siphon combined with Heavy Ammo Finder and Heavy Ammo Scout. So that way, whenever you spawn heavy ammo, you can also have it for your teammates. If you want to go about this in a different way, you could also consider using Dynamo. I think in the in-game PvE, it's going to be not necessarily that safe to use Dynamo. I think you can if you want to. I think if you use this in something like the Legend campaign, I think Dynamo's fine. But if you try to use this in something like a Master Raid or Grandmaster Nightfalls, you're gonna have not the best time trying to use Dynamo. But this is why I just default to the heavy ammo and heavy ammo scout finders. But in like low level PvE, this is perfectly fine. Using Dynamo, Dynamo would be reduces super cooldown when you use your class ability in your targets. So we do want to have a relatively high uptime on the super, but we'll get to that when we get to that. For the arm piece, we're going to be using Impact Induction. Causing damage with a powered melee attack reduces your grenade cooldown. Grenade Kickstart. When your grenade energy is fully expended, your armor charge is consumed and you gain grenade energy for each armor charge used. And then I'm personally just using Fastball because I'm used to the Fastball playstyle. You don't have to use Fastball. And if you want to, there is an alternative for these that I can show you here in a little while. For the chest piece, I leave all 3 slots open for your choice of 1 or 2 resistance mods, and then or for the elemental resistance for 2 of them, and then maybe like a concussive dampener or a melee resistance. So leave all 3 open for you for your choice. For the boot selection, I personally am going to be using Recuperation. Replenishes health each time you pick up an Orb of Power, and Innervation reduces grenade cooldown each time you pick up an Orb of Power. You are going to be having a high uptime in Restoration and a high uptime in Cure on this build, but you do want to use... So you could make a solid argument for taking off Recuperation for something else. I think, personally, that it's a little important to have the orbs on the ground be able to restore health. So I think with this build in particular, I think Recuperation is a little more necessary. When we go to the solo playstyle build, I think it will be not quite as important, and I'll show you why here in a little bit whenever we get done with the armor mods. But we're going to go with Recuperation for replenishing health each time you pick up an Orb of Power. Innervation reduces grenade cooldown each time you pick up an Orb of Power, and then we're going to go with stacks on stacks. Picking up an Orb of Power grants you 1 additional stack of armor charge, and then we're going to be looking at the class item, which we will have 3 slots open for. We're going to be using Bomber, reduces grenade cooldown when using our class ability. We're going to have 2 double bomber, or we're going to have what's called double bomber, which is just 2 bomber slots, and then one slot finally used for time dilation. Your decaying armor charge has a longer duration, so that way we can have a longer amount of time on our armor charge to be able to use for grenade kickstart. Now that I've gone over kind of the team based play, how you generally want to do with it, like I said earlier, you'll want to use your healing grenade and you'll want to throw it, maybe primarily hit a teammate with it first. And whenever the teammates hit with it, it will automatically activate Ember of Benevolence because it should instantly cure on hit whenever you hit them, and then they'll do the it'll have the cure times two and the restoration times two activated. And whenever you hit them with the grenade right before it spawns into a turret, you will automatically proc Ember of Benevolence for yourself, which is your increase in your own ability cooldowns, which is good. I personally prefer leading off with that and then activating your class ability to activate the Hellion. So that's going to be kind of the play style for team based play. Now we're going to go into the solo play build. So the main thing that I'm changing for solo play, if I'm playing by myself, I'm going to change this and a couple mods. So the things to change if you're playing solo, since you don't have teammates nearby, you're just going to be doing solo play. Using Ember of Benevolence by yourself is a wasted fragment. You're going to slot over to Ember of Empyrean. Solar Weaponer ability Final Blows extend the duration of restoration and radiant effects applied to you. So what you're going to do to make the solo playstyle work is just do the same thing that you would do with just about any normal solar build in Solar 3.0, specifically with the healing grenade chain into the Ember of Empyrean. So you're going to be leading off with the healing grenade. You don't have to throw it far away. You can throw it close by where your turret can recognize you quicker and use the restoration on you. Once you have restoration active, then you can use Ember of Empyrean to start chaining and refreshing the restoration with your kills. So as far as fragments go, I'm not changing anything else on it. I will change a couple of armor mods. So specifically, if you're running by yourself, there's no point using heavy ammo scout. You could use another harmonic siphon. Rapid solar weapon final blows create an orb of power, and more than one of these increases the potency of the orb. So if you're running around solo, you could have two harmonic siphons. You could change out the heavy ammo finder to dynamo. Just depends on your preference. But that would be for the solo play style. And then another thing, if you're going to be using Ember of Empyrean, you're going to be having a high uptime on restoration. So you could consider taking off recuperation, likely for innervation or even insulation. So, like we talked about earlier, innervation reduces grenade cooldown each time you pick up an orb of power. Whenever you use insulation, reduces class ability cooldown each time you pick up an orb of power. I think insulation may be a little bit overkill because you are going to be having a high uptime on Ember of Singeing, which, if you remember, getting the Scorch debuff onto enemies gives you class ability cooldown, so you may want to consider double innervation. So, with those things being said about the build, that was going to be kind of the solo options that you have for the build. Now let's talk about the stats, and then we'll go on to the weaponry. So, mobility doesn't matter, have it as low as possible. Resilience, you still get at tier 10 resilience, you still get 30% damage reduction in PvE. Always run as high resil as possible. Recovery, you want to have recovery relatively high as you can, because it's tied to your class ability cooldown as a warlock. Grenade, I want to have a mildly high. I want to have a highly moderate to high, if possible, discipline stat because of grenade cooldown, which is going to be tied directly into your exotics or for spawning the healing grenade. So you want to have a higher uptime on this. You also do supplement your cooldowns on your grenade thanks to Ember of Benevolence. So it's kind of moderate cooldown right here, but whenever you get into the gameplay cycle, you will see that it will physically come back faster due to Ember of Benevolence, especially when your healing grenade is hitting those targets or hitting your teammates. Intellect stat, I want to have a moderate amount of use on this, as this super is really good for ad clear, and I think it would be safe to say to be able to use it in case of a emergency situation where you're low on health. You just activate it, give yourself radiance, and give yourself a little bit of an easier pathway to slaying out enemies if you're being overrun. So I want to have a high intellect stat. And then strength, I tank strength. I don't really care too much about having a too terrible high of uptime on it. Regardless of whatever stat I have on it, Ember of Benevolence with the team play based gameplay, it this tier 2 strength is going to be boosted because of Ember of Benevolence and the ability cooldown reduction. So the last part that I want to talk about today is the weapons you should consider using. For the kinetic slot, the main thing I would be concerned with using potentially would be, or one way that you can go about playing, rather not to be so concerned with, but one route that you can go in the kinetic slot, and people would love you for using this in raids, which is Lumina with noble rounds. Kills with this weapon leave behind remnants. Absorbing a remnant converts your next hip-fired shot into an ally-seeking noble round and partially refills the magazine. Plus, with this being an exotic kinetic weapon, or with being an exotic primary in general, the amount of kills that it takes to spawn heavy weaponry is lower with a exotic primary weapon than it is the amount of kills that you need with a primary legendary weapon. So, seriously consider using Lumina for this to give noble rounds. And then to feed more back into the build, if you don't want to use Lumina, you can use another special. You can use a different weapon. You could use a special if you want to. I'm personally going through with a special weapon, and with a special weapon, the kinetic slot, because I am primarily using weapons that have both incandescent and demolitionist. Demolitionist to add back into that cooldown reduction for the grenade, and then incandescent to spread scorch to targets, which feeds directly into Ember of Singeing, which will feed back into the class ability cooldown for the Hellion aspect, so we can respawn the Hellion and feed back into its cycle using incandescent, using demolitionist to refill your grenade cooldown. So I'm personally preferring demolitionist incandescent weapons. My personal favorite is the BXR Battler. One weapon that you should seriously consider would be the new No Hesitation Solar Auto Rifle. It is a what's called a support frame AR, which is a 600 RPM, flexible and agile frame capable of healing allies and hurting foes, harming targets, builds a restorative charge, hip firing at allies while this weapon is charged, heals them with rapid healing, increasing weapon damage and bestowing restoration to your allies. So, the healing aspect should be able to help you feed back into Ember of Benevolence because of restoration. So, I believe I will actually try out this AR. I've never tried this AR out, so I believe I'm going to actually give it a go. And for the LMG, I'm obviously using an incandescent LMG, so whenever I need to use ad clear, I can get kills with incandescent, get incandescent activated onto targets nearby, get that scorch spread, reactivate singeing, and therefore have my healing rift back up, because I'm using healing rift. When my teammates stand in the healing rift, have more protection from the environment around them. With that being said, that's what I really wanted to show off. This is probably going to be, right now, the best support play for the Warlock in PvE. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments section. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a good one.